So, this is in response to a conversation I had with someone at the weekend who was trying to convince me that the reason there were so many more gay people that they knew was because being gay was cool. I guess the thing that annoys me most about this kind of comment, because it's definitely not the first time I've heard this, is the idea that I'm doing what I'm doing, I'm loving who I'm loving because I want to be part of some kind of club, I want to be cool, I want to be included in something. And that's absolutely not why I like girls. The time that I spent in my life trying to come to terms with how I felt about the people around me and what that meant for the relationship that I was already in and what that meant for moving on in the world, talking to my parents about it, talking to my friends about it, particularly those friends that I'd had conversations with who I knew they probably weren't going to take it very well. All of those were really, really hard for me, and I can't imagine going through that just to be part of the gay club or whatever. Like, the whole idea just completely blows my mind. But I guess the second thing it makes me think about is the fact that actually, yeah, in my life, now I know a lot more gay or otherwise queer people than probably my parents did when they were my age, or, even 10 years ago, my older cousins knew when they were in school or at uni. And for me, that's a triumph. It's not a fad, it's not a phase or whatever. It's proving to me that the efforts that the queer people of the past, people who started things like the Stonewall riots, and people who campaigned for marriage equality, and people who organised pride events and make TV about queer people and all of these sorts of things, they're succeeding in what it is they want to do. They're making it more acceptable for people to come out and talk about who it is they really are and who it is they really love and how they really feel about themselves and about other people. I know that to an extent I experience a lot of privilege in that I can pass as straight and cis, and it makes me realise that 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, I probably would never have come out as bisexual. I probably would never even have realised that I could be bisexual, because it wouldn't have been something I was allowed to consider. It wouldn't have been something that I could find out about, that I could talk about, that I could find people who felt like me. I probably would have married a guy and lived my whole life, not feeling unfulfilled, but not feeling as fulfilled in my life as I do now. The person that I am now and the way that I feel about people makes me feel great at the moment. And it's not to say that back before I realised I wasn't completely straight, I wasn't happy with my relationships and that I wasn't happy with what was going on in my life, but I get excited by what there is out there for me to explore. But I think the other thing that bothers some people about this is people who've struggled a lot with how they feel, people who have had really bad experiences of coming out as whatever variation of queer they are, people who haven't had supporting environments to be in while going through these really difficult times in their lives. I guess some of them feel like today, in this day and age, that other people who are going through this have it easier, that there are now so many more resources out there. And it's, well, certainly in the UK, it's much more accepted. You're a woman dating a woman, or you are not the gender that you were assigned at birth, or whatever. And there are people out there that identify as bisexual, or identify as non-binary, or identify as gay or lesbian for a while and then decide that it's not for them. There are people who've had a really hard time with being gay or being trans, are resentful of the way that some people can take these labels and sort of put them on and take them off again as they wish. And to a certain extent, I get that. I get the idea that using the name and in a way appropriating the feelings and the sympathies of people by taking these labels on and off could be seen as trying to just be different, be interesting. But I personally feel like this should be something that anyone, no matter how old they are, should be free to explore, There was a period in my life when I knew a lot about all different types of gender identity, so I sat down and I thought about it for quite a long time, seeing if any of these other labels, any of these other ways of thinking about myself, any of these other other identities fit better than girl, which is how I've been identifying my whole life. And the fact that I came back after that period of exploration thinking girl is basically fine, demigirl also, but girl is basically fine, I don't think that should necessarily invalidate the way trans people feel who either go on that kind of journey themselves or have always had a feeling of wrongness when they go away and think about it, when they discover these labels, that they pick them up and they keep them. It's something the whole queer community could and should celebrate. The fact that we, as a worldwide society, are becoming slowly more free to explore these things, more open to discussing them, more supportive of changes that people want to go through. And I realise it's not perfect yet, and I realise that there are some people that still have a really hard time with it, but there are so many ways in which it is better now than it has been in the past. Something really strange happened to me last week, something that's still kind of blowing my mind. When I was at school, I went to an all-girls school and I was bullied quite a lot when I was there. And there were some of my bullies, the worst thing they could think to call me was a lesbian. That was the absolute worst insult that they could give me. That was the thing that made me feel awful. And not because necessarily I associated it with loving other girls, but because it was the feeling behind it that they had. And I've moved on with my life. I'm Facebook friends with quite a lot of my school bullies, but mostly out of a desire to look at their Facebook and see how much better I'm doing with my life than they are. And I have other friends. I'm very comfortable in the identity that I have now. Back then, I still considered myself completely straight, so it wasn't that they were insulting what I thought I was. And, now that I identify as bisexual, I don't associate it with those negative things that they said about me. So fine, I've moved on with my life, whatever, bits still pop up on my Facebook feed of what they're doing with their lives, and I kind of don't care anymore. But last week on their Facebook, I saw pictures of two of my school bullies getting married. And my first reaction was complete disbelief and hilarity. I just thought it was the funniest and most surreal thing that had ever happened to me, that these bullies who called me a lesbian were now two women marrying each other. It was just the funniest, most surreal thing that ever happened to me, and I just thought this is really ironic and funny, and I kind of wanted to sort of shove it in their faces of, you called me a lesbian and now look who's the lesbian, nah. But once my inner 14-year-old had got over that reaction to it, I thought actually about how much they must have grown and how much positive reinforcement they must have had in their lives from friends, from family, possibly even from the media. These are two girls who've gone from thinking that a lesbian is the absolute worst thing you could be, to being happily married to one another, making them probably, in the eyes of the rest of the world, lesbians. I can't bring myself, when I think about it in that way, to hate them for calling me those names. Yeah, sure, they were hurtful and they were horrible, and I had a horrible, horrible time at school because of some of the things that they called me, only one of which was a lesbian. I'm sure if I were to meet them now, lesbian would be the last thing they would want to call me as an insult. They might still want to insult me, but at least they wouldn't use lesbian. They'd call me tacky and having a poor sense of fashion and a massive nerd, which are all true and not necessarily particularly insulting at this point. Being gay, being trans, being bi, being ace isn't cool. It's still really hard for so many people, not only to come out to their friends and their family and their schoolmates or their co-workers, but it's really hard for people to come to terms within themselves about how they feel and how they want to identify and who they love. Being gay isn't cool, but I am really grateful that there is a 14-year-old out there somewhere in the world who is less likely to be called a lesbian as an insult and won't be associating homosexuality or being trans as a bad thing. I'm grateful that younger and younger kids are being allowed to express their sexuality, everything from tiny 11-year-olds having little schoolgirl crushes on one another to 5-year-olds saying no, I'm not a boy, I'm a girl, I don't care what you say. And that there are environments out there where that is perfectly fine for them, that they will grow up not really being able to understand the wrongness and the horrible, horrible feeling of being other and being alone that so many of us grew up feeling. Maybe one day being gay will be cool. Maybe one day everyone will go through a gay phase in the same way they go through a scene phase or a Pokemon phase. And I hope that those kind of phases that they have mean that they are open to thinking about their own sexualities, their own genders, and that it will result one day in just a more accepting and happier society for everyone who is queer in any way, because all of their friends and all of their family and everyone they know at least knew enough to question themselves about it. And everyone out there who is seriously questioning their gender or their sexual orientation feels safe and secure in trying things out, in working out how they feel and talking about it with their friends and their family, because it's something that everybody does. This was an unscheduled interlude in my Managing Polyamory series. Normal service will resume on Wednesday with part 2 of that series. And if you have also had this kind of conversation with someone, let me know in the comments. Let me know if there was anything else that you said about it. And thank you very much for watching.